yes, Alex Tuch is counting against the cap because long-term injured reserve cap relief only happens if a team is set to go over the cap. So, for example, Alex Tuch in Vegas, because the team was at the cap, they got relief from his $4.5 million to be able to go over the cap. Mm-hmm. But in any other situation, that money stays on the salary cap if you're not up at the cap already.
Marty, you're so obsessed with this. Do you want to start there with Kevyn Adams, who has joined us now, as far as how this deal came about from a cap compliance standpoint?
Yeah, let me ask you this, Kevin. Did you have to wait until like early November so that the dollars matched up, and after a month in the season of the $10 million of Jack Eichel, it actually made it that you could go above the floor? Is that a reason why you guys had to wait a little bit?
No, yes and no. I think Mark Jakubowski studies this like 24 hours a day to make sure all the calculations line up, but is super, super complicated. But obviously we had to make sure that when this deal happened, we were cap compliant. And obviously we knew that going into it. So we had a plan, but no, it was definitely just another piece of the puzzle as we were working through this.
Kevin, how much did you pursue, desire another player on top of what you got, another, let's say, depth player type from Vegas that might have bumped your cap hit up a little bit? No, because we had a plan that been working on in conjunction with this, so that it wasn't a concern. Because at the same point, it may sound like, hey, we'd like to add another player. One, the team has to be willing to move the player, and two, then it's going to take a roster spot away from one of our current players. So that's not something that I was comfortable with. So what we've been working on is how do we put all the pieces together, and then also have simultaneously have a plan. So that we've been that's been a piece of this. It's part of why it's made it so complicated, Duffer, honestly. Obviously, a lot has now changed for this team over the last year specifically, but when you look at all the pieces that are on the current roster and the prospects that you have either in Rochester or outside of professional hockey at the moment, do you believe that you have the centerman that you need moving forward? Now, the only reason I ask it this way, Kevin, is even with someone like Krebs, depending on who you want to listen to, some may still project him as a winger as opposed to a center. And obviously we're still watching Cousins and we're not even watching Middlestat because he's been hurt, but he doesn't have a lot of games under his belt at this level. Like, are you convinced that you've got the right foundation down the middle now?
Well, I think it's an interesting question that you have to, when you look at top centers typically around the league, they're hard to find. And most of the time the team drafts them, and then it's challenging to find that position. So we knew that about Jack, obviously, that if we're going to move him, this is a really valuable commodity in the NHL, a top centerman. So, obviously that played a role in all this. Do I think, I think we're always going to look and see where our guys are at currently, where our guys will get, where we think they're going to continue to get better at, and slot them in the right spot. And then there's still interesting things going on with a guy like Tage Thompson. I mean, he is, to me, really like taking off as in the center role. And I'm not talking about points. I'm just talking about the way he's starting to play the position and the 200-foot game that he's showing. So where's he going to be at Christmas as a center, or where's he going to be this time next year as a center? All that stuff's in play. So, and then obviously you get to the draft again, and where are we drafting? Who's available? And, that plays a piece. And so that's what I talked about today a little bit is, we're building this young core. Some of these pieces are here in Buffalo that we're going to really work to get better. Some pieces are in Rochester, and some pieces aren't even here yet. They're either not even drafted by us yet, or they're drafted and playing somewhere else. So that's the stuff we think about and talk about all the time.
So, Kevin, obviously you are banking on developing a lot of assets. Even, you mentioned the Peterka and Quinns and Owen Power and your draft picks this year, going back to a few years. But in Buffalo, the last 10 years, maybe even dating back to when you were an assistant coach, like whoever was in charge of development failed to develop those players, those draft picks, or hit on the draft picks to put the organization in a better position. So my question, and a lot of fans' question, would be like, what makes you believe that you have the right people in place and that you will develop those guys to turn them into the players that will attain their full potential?
Yeah, you touched on a really, really important point that I sometimes think it's overlooked when you talk about the development of hockey players. It doesn't stop just because a guy's playing in the NHL. You know, you're not, oh, now this guy's an NHL player. You have to develop players while they're in the NHL. And as they're, these young players in their early 20s, even you get into your mid 20s, you're still learning, you're still growing, you're still becoming better. So that's one of the things that, that Donnie Granato and I spent a lot of time on, as we were going in the summer and after he was hired and talking about, okay, what does the coaching staff look like? Because we know where Rasmus Dahlin is and Tage Thompson and Middlestat and these guys, but how do we get them better? So there's a development mindset of what's going on in Buffalo. Then, I feel really confident the way that coaching staff was put together with that in mind and the work they're doing. Then you look at our, Rochester. Now these players they're one step away, but it's developing them. How do we put them in situations to improve? I went to Rochester last night to watch the game and just seeing, Samuelson in his first game back and Quinn and Peterka and these kids get put in positions that are going to help them improve. So that's a part of the development. And then you have your player development for your draft picks. And, Adam Mayer is our director of player development and, has a lot of experience. The staff that he's now built with Pacer and Tim Kennedy and Seamus and these guys, they're excellent. So it is a huge focus and a huge area that we've put resources into, because you're right, Marty, we have to get that right. It's critical to how our organization is going to take the next step.
Kevin, have you ever had interest in acquiring/reacquiring a right shot defenseman that may or may not be on a roster of a team you may or may not be playing tonight?
Oh man, you're good, Duffer.
One that you may or may not have lost in the expansion draft about 6 months ago.
Obviously, I can't get into other teams' players and talk about that, but what I do always look at is where are we now and where are we going to be in the future, and what positions do we maybe need more depth on? And just doesn't take a hockey savant to look at our back end and say, okay, we have a lot of left shot, either players or prospects that are coming. Where's the right side leave us? So that's something we obviously talk about, and we're going to keep working to figure out a way to make our team and organization better. So we'll keep our options open for sure.
Quickly, the next time you get on the plane, is it to go scout hockey players because you've been to Michigan, you've been to Rochester, you've been everywhere, or is it to finally take that vacation that you didn't get to take last summer because you've been on the call trying to figure out this Eichel thing for the last 6 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got to look at my calendar, see the next flight I'll be on. I'm going to watch out Owen power play tomorrow in Michigan, but I'm actually going to drive, so I can't count that one. But you know what, Marty, it's been an intense stretch here, and it's been there will at some point be some downtime needed for sure to rest my brain, but it's part of the job. I knew the work that we were going to have to do to get to this spot, but eventually when I can get on that plane you're talking about, I'll look forward to it.
Kevin, thanks so much for the time on this busy day.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys, take care.